This podcast is for singers who have music in their soul and want to be in the spotlight. We are INVICTA Vox Radio.
Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of INVICTA Vox Radio. We, as always, are your hosts, Mike and
Angie Lee.
And today we're going to start off the first piece of a two-part podcast.
Yeah, 2 episodes. It's going to be a 2-episode arc.
Yep. Yeah. And what this is really about is bringing value to people. How do you bring value through your music into everything you're doing? And what this really ends up being is, how do you get more views on YouTube? How do you get more listens to, like, on your play, or more plays
on
in
your
playlist, Spotify? How do you bring more to people and get more people to latch on or become fans of what you're ultimately doing?
Yeah, so the 2 parts we're going to kind of talk about in this first episode of this, we're going to talk about the mindsets behind having value and bringing value to yourself and to others. And then next podcast episode, we're going to talk about the tactics to actually execute on that.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So this first piece, though, it's really important to make sure that you're setting things up so that way you don't get lost in the process, because one of the worst things you can do is go out there and create art or create something that is purely meant for other people and you end up hating it. Right.
Or like you have the mentality that this is only for others and I have to do everything that other people want.
Right. Because then you end up trapping yourself in like a self-made prison.
Right. And you hate it. And or the flip side of where you're like, I'm going to make art for myself and it's only going to be for me. And then you put it out there and no one likes it. And you're like, oh, everyone hates me and everyone hates my stuff. It's like, well, you just didn't quite think of all the way through this. So yeah, there's those are the 2 sides of the spectrum, right? Like you're only creating it for other people and not thinking of yourself, or you're purely creating it for yourself and not thinking about how others might perceive it or value it.
Right.
So now we have to find the medium.
So when we've talked about this in the past, you always like to bring it up in this concept of like two circles. You have an inner ring and an outer ring.
Yeah.
And why don't you just kind of explain? Let's just start with the inner ring and then we'll go to the outer shell.
Yeah, it's this perspective of, okay, so the inner ring is the value you bring to yourself. So when you're creating music, when you are recording, when you are writing songs, when you are preparing something to perform, at whatever level that may be, whatever you're creating, at first, we always have to consider, do I love this? Right? Because if you don't love it, if you're not creating value for yourself, then why are you doing it to begin with? If you're not finding enjoyment and love of the process and totally being able to throw yourself into that, then there's really no point, right? Because like you said, at the end of the day, you can feel trapped. You can feel like you're not really doing something that you love, or you're not enjoying the journey because you're not creating something for yourself.
So one thing I want to just touch on that you just brought up and really ask you the question is, you said you have to bring value to yourself.
Right.
What do you see as value to yourself?
As an artist, if I'm not doing this and feeling fulfilled doing it, then what's the point? For real. So I've had a huge resurgence in my songwriting lately, of just getting really excited about my songwriting, scheduling time for myself to write, setting up really cool collaborations, and really getting into the studio and working my songwriting and expressing myself. If I'm creating songs that I don't love to listen to, that I'm not connecting to, that aren't expressing what I want to express, and they are not fulfilling me, then what is the point? Right? And that doesn't mean that every song I write is going to be a hit. That doesn't mean every song I write is going to be loved by all. But at the fundamental level, if I'm not able to use my art and create my art to express myself, to communicate, to feel, and have that deeper understanding of myself and others, then what is the point? Right? I have to find enjoyment of it. I have to find fulfillment. I have to find purpose in what I'm creating. And that is that first layer. That's what it means to find value in that layer with yourself. It's knowing yourself too, right? Like everyone says you can't love someone else until you can love yourself. It's the same thing with your art. You can't expect other people to love and appreciate your craft and your art unless you are loving and appreciating what you're doing. Truly. Right? And also, it's the same analogy. If you are creating something purely for someone else, then where are you at in that equation? Right? If you're in a relationship with someone where you're purely doing that relationship on your own and you're giving everything and not receiving back, then what's the point? Right? So it's this idea of this relationship with yourself as an artist, creating value, creating love and appreciation and purpose and fulfillment within the art that you're creating, being authentic to yourself and being real with what you want to express and feel and create.
And I completely agree with that. Another layer on top of that, I think, is becoming secure with your own art.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
Right, because before you're going to take it out to other people, you need to find that you're confident in what you're doing, that you love what you're doing, so you feel secure in it. Because once you take it out to the world, there's going to be people who hate it.
Oh, totally.
And
just for the sake of hating it.
And people always bring that up, like, oh, the haters, which we have our own thoughts on that.
For sure.
But people are going to tear you apart out there.
They're going to try. They're going to try to spit poison at you.
Right. And in that moment, you're going to be able to sit back and say, okay, well, I made this for me and people like me. Mm-hmm. I didn't make it for people like you. Yeah. Which that's okay. And that's what it should be, is you should feel confident in what you're doing for you. Right?
Absolutely. Well, and to that extent, like when you put things out in the marketplace or just putting yourself out out there in different positions to begin with, in social media, just as a person, there's always going to be, like you said, haters. There's always going to be people spitting poison at you, and you have to decide before you even get to that level. Like you said, if you're secure in yourself and if you're going to listen to it, right? There's a difference between criticism, constructive criticism, and poison.
Right.
Right. Just like pure, spit hatred. Like there's totally a difference between the two. And the next layer, we're going to talk about that for sure. But being secure in yourself and in your message and loving who you are and loving what you're doing to the point where you want to start sharing it is super important. And kind of building that shell around yourself to say, you know what? I don't have to listen to every jab. I don't have to listen to all this feedback. I'm going to listen to the things that matter.
Right.
And I'm going to put a filter on because I don't need poison in my life. And so you have to kind of be aware of that before you move to the next ring.
Right. Because it also comes down to creating a level of quality that you enjoy yourself.
Yeah, that you're proud to present.
Right.
Well, right. And as far as like that shell I was just talking about too, it's when people give you poison, you decide if you're going to take that personally or not.
Sure.
Right. And if you're like, you know what, I'm not going to take any of this personally. This is my thing for me. Then you're good. You're not going to worry about the haters.
Yep. All right. Now let's move out into this next ring or next ring.
Phase. So the first, the core of it is bring value to yourself. Right. Mm-hmm. And now we know what that kind of looks like. The second ring around that is bring value to others. And I think this is where it gets really confusing for people, right? And it was kind of like the spectrum we talked about at the beginning. It's really easy to get wrapped up in what other people want and forget yourself. Or it's really easy to only think about yourself and just assume that everyone else is going to like it.
Right.
We don't want either of those.
But where the magic happens is where the two intersect.
Right. We see this a lot. We have a lot of people at the studio who get really frustrated with this, where they're like, I put a video up and nobody liked it. Right?
Right.
And it's like, well, did you pause to think, I love this and I'm proud of this and I connect to this. How are other people going to respond to this? How are other people going to value and perceive this? It is important to consider that. That's that next ring, because a lot of artists put stuff out and never get any reciprocation from it. And they always wonder why, but they don't actually think about the perception of them.
Right. Which in my head, that comes down to kind of two things. One, you need to find your audience, right? And that's a whole topic of marketing and finding your niche and being able to broadcast and distribute to that niche, which that's a
different
whole
episode.
Yeah, that's a whole different game, but which is an important piece of the puzzle. But once you are in that spot, there's still this thing where sometimes you make stuff that only you're going to jam on, and you kind
Yeah.
of lose other people in it because you aren't making art that's really resonating with
Or
people yet.
relevant to the
Right.
current industry.
Sure.
Sure.
And so with that, again, it's this refining process. It's being able to take a step back and saying, okay, I'm staying true to myself, but what's working and what's not working.
Well, and there's a couple different ways to do that. I love this idea. We used to talk about this all the time with my band. Are we going to be a band's band or a fan's band? Right?
Sure.
If you're a band's band or you're an artist's artist, you're a person who doesn't care about mainstream media, and you don't care about going and having thousands of people listening to your music, because the only other people who are going to get you are other artists, right? Because they understand the fine tuning things that you're doing. So are you going to make your music for those people, or are you going to make it so you have lots of fans? Are you a band's band or a fan's band? So that's a really cool thing to ask yourself too, because maybe you want to only be a band's band. Maybe you want to be progressive and underground, you know, and that's a totally different thing. And then you're going to find that really niched market that really resonates with your music, and that's good enough, you know? So that's a thing to consider.
So here's one thing that I thought was kind of funny is one time we were talking to one of our artists. We sat down and we were having this conversation about they were releasing their first single, and then they kind of had these other plans. So it's like, well, I won't be able to come back to my music for a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And
I'm going to launch my single and then take a break.
yeah. And then come back to it when I'm ready, which it's an interesting model, but based on the situation, it is what it is. But and I think everybody goes through this where it's like, okay, I've created my first single. What if this goes viral? What if this blows up? And it just like, I'm an instant superstar. And I looked at him and I said, don't worry.
It's not going to happen.
It won't blow up.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I know that's probably how it is. It's like,
no, that's what it is.
That's what it is.
It's your first single.
Because you have to go through this process of dialing it in. You've made something that you love now, but we're not, because you're going to take this break, one, we're not going to put in the effort to go find the people who would love this,
yes.
right? Because there's no point
in building an audience while you're not here.
Yeah. And so later on we can do that and invest more in that. But in the interim, also, the people that you just automatically project it to, only a percentage of them are going to be your audience. And number two, you haven't spent that time dialing in what's working, what's resonating, what your audience is loving.
That's it. That's
and
the
then
game, right?
Going from there.
Well, and we tell our people that how do you dial that in? How do you get that perfect blend between I'm true to myself and I'm actually giving other people value? I'm actually producing something that other people want, what other people are willing to spend their money on, what people are willing to spend their time listening to, their resources to share in this with me. And like you said, the best thing you can do is go test. Right?
Yeah.
It's not, I'm going to produce a single and be a success overnight. It's hey, I'm going to go find out where my local open mic is, and I'm going to go play every single week. We had another artist do that here at the studio. She's awesome. She actually committed to, for like 6 months, go to an open mic every single week. You can have an 8-minute set. So she planned to play 2 songs a night, and she committed to never playing the same song twice, unless she got really great feedback from the audience and she wanted to try it out one more time. But it was a really great way for her to, one, dial in who she is as an artist, dial in her songwriting, 3, dial in more performing reps, 4, then see what the response is to her art from the audience. The cool thing at that point is you're throwing so much out there, and you're getting so many reps creating, that you're dialing all those things in at the same time. And you're still being true to yourself while seeing what the market likes, while seeing what the audience wants to hear more of. People will come up to you after shows and be like, hey, where can I get that song? Right?
Right.
And that's on a very small scale, guys. That's not like thousands of people listening to it every week. That's like maybe 50 to 100 people listening to it every week. Right? Or even maybe less than that. But you're still getting this very real feedback from people that are there who want to hear your music, who want to be invested in what you're doing.
Sure.
And you're also going to be able to dial in what type of people are resonating with your music.
Absolutely.
And the secret weapon with that is, we're going to talk about this more in depth another time too, but you guys, the people who want to listen to your music are people like you, right? So speak to yourself when you are marketing and when you are considering who you're going to bring value to.
So just to take this episode and recap it up, let's close this one out.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then obviously the next episode that we post will be a continuation of this topic. But if you were to just recap it real quick, what are the 2 rings and why is it important to start at the core?
Okay, so the inner core of really bringing value to people is first bringing value to yourself, really dialing in who you are as an artist, what you want to say, resonating with what you're creating, loving what you're creating, enjoying the process, and really finding fulfillment in that, finding value in that creation for yourself. And then ring number 2 is then learning how to take that out and make it valuable for other people. And we talked about the way we do that is by dialing it in, by going out and testing things, by just trying it over and over and over through trial and error, creating stuff that still resonates with you, but then putting it out into the marketplace to test it and see what people reciprocate back to you. Meanwhile, dialing in your audience.
And that's what we're going to focus most on in the next episode is actually what is that testing process? How do you bring more value to other people while staying true to yourself from a tactical perspective?
But yeah, this whole episode is all about, really having the mindset of those 2 rings. Because if you're not even aware that they're both there, how do you ask the right questions? Right?
Sure.
How do you actually get tactical with it? So if you guys haven't thought about it from this perspective before, it's time to really start thinking about that and not going too far on either side of the spectrum of I'm only creating for myself or I'm only creating for others.
All right, guys. Well, that pretty much wraps up this one.
Yeah. Please, on YouTube, we're going to leave... we want you guys to leave a comment of where you guys think you're at within that spectrum of the inner ring and the outer ring and where you feel like you need to get to work on with your own artistry. And if you are not on YouTube, go to your journal, write it down.
And as always, be sure to let other people know about what we're doing here. Mm-hmm. Like, subscribe, post a review.
Share it up.
Yeah.
Spread the love.
Just help us out, and we'll just keep doing this for...
Ever.
All
right, guys. Until next time.
Peace.
Peace.